Morning, everybody. I'm Caleb. I recognize a decent amount of you. A lot of you guys have been to a couple of these seminars before. Purpose of today's seminar is Rob asked me to come in and kind of keep it simple. So this is going to be pretty basic. I'm not going to go really far into depth with currents or anything too crazy. Just kind of, basic Lake Michigan tactics, basic tackle, basic what we do every day to go out and simply just put together a cooler fish. I've got 4 different species we're going to cover. I'm not going to really cover browns today. It's not something we hit too hard out of North Point very often. So we're going to focus on the other 4. So start off, you see this picture here. This picture we took last summer. It doesn't look like a big rack of fish or anything, but actually one evening we were sitting on the dock and we thought to ourselves, we don't got nothing going on. Let's go see if we can catch a king. And it was midsummer. We had all been fishing like 150 to 220, and everybody's like, you know what? Let's go see if there's anything on the hill. Nobody's fished the hill for a while. Let's go give it a shot. So we just kind of putzed out. There's 4 captains here and one of the first baits, and we went out and we all kind of picked our favorite lure and threw it in the water. Water temperature wasn't very good, but there was some bait on the hill. And for you guys that don't fish up at North Point or anywhere locally here, the hill is just a small drop off. From about 50 to 100 feet of water, it slides down pretty quick. Let's try and catch a king. And you see 5 kings here, not real big ones, but we did end up catching another 3 after this picture was taken. I think we ran 4 or 6 rods, just kind of went out there just fooling around, having a good time. And I was like, oh, there's kings here. And we all ended up fishing on the hill in the morning and burning half the fuel. And it was so simple. It was like, maybe we overthink this every day. So we'll start with, where am I going fishing today? You've got a number of things to look at when you're heading out of the harbor. Is water temp, bait, weather, fishing reports. What does the graph look like? It's kind of the few things that I kind of look at the most. One thing I'm looking at the water temp. If the water temp looks good inside of 60 foot of water, I'm going to go slow. I'm going to back my throttles off. I'm going to watch my graph. And if I start seeing some bait, I'll stop. Even if we've all been fishing offshore, you get a strong west wind, or a wind that blows in some cold water, or some bait fish, it's worth looking, especially if it's early in the morning. Even if that water is warm, you get into the high 50s, low 60s, and you start marking bait on your way out, those fish, especially early mornings, they'll come in there. They're not going to stay in there, but they're going to come in. They're going to come and eat. So one thing to look at, just for, I don't know how much experience we have in this room, but that is just a simple thing to look at,
Are you talking about surface temperature when the low?
Surface temp and water below. But even water below, if it's warm and there's bait there, those fish will come in and feed. They won't stay there for a long period of time, but when they're hungry, they will come in and feed. You don't need a probe for this. You're just looking for the marks, you're looking for the bait. That's watching your graph. You guys have a probe, it's going to be a lot easier. You can stop, drop a probe, check it, and know what the water temp is. But if you have the cool water temp, but there's no bait in the area, there may not be fish there. They might have some passing through or moving around, but not staying there. I don't run a probe. It's just my personal preference. I've been doing it for a lot of years. The only thing that I really have considered getting a probe for is so I can judge the current more. I think that helps a lot for your speed down at the ball. But I was taught by some old timers. To this day, I'll catch myself doing it. I'll be fishing on the hill, 50 feet down, and I'll pull my downer ball up, and I'll grab it right away, and I'll feel that lead ball. That lead ball is ice cold. You have cold water. It's the simple old way of doing it. Now, I have nothing against probes. I don't want to lose them, so I don't run them. And I don't seem to have a lot of trouble catching fish without the probe. There are days I'll find myself calling another captain I know or a friend, hey, can you give me a water temp down, blah, blah, just to judge. Because, if you're fishing 90 feet down, while that ball's coming up, it can change temperatures if it comes to a lot of warmer water. Weather. Weather is a huge factor in where I'm going to set up in the morning. Is it overcast? Is it sunny? Am I going out mid-afternoon, sunny, overcast? Is it rough? There's a lot of times that when I'm fishing way offshore in 180 to 260 feet of water, and I've got 6 footers, I don't want to go out there. And I'll fish differently in 100 to 140 than I would out there. And usually they'll still be fishing there. You might have less, and you're going to fish differently but there'll still be some fish inside of there. Overcast versus sunny. You got a big, bright, sunny day and you're not out till 8 o'clock in the morning. My customers were 2 hours late or whatever. I'm not stopping in 60 feet of water. For me, I think it'll just be a waste of my time. The kings that were in there, the silverfish that were really active feeding in that warm water, they're probably gone or they're shut down. And you could stay there and try and wait them out, but your chances of getting out deeper, where there's some deeper, darker water down below, your odds increase. Running a diverse spread. How many guys here run more than 6 rods? Okay, so kind of half of you guys. You can catch a lot of fish with 6 rods. What I tell a lot of guys starting off is focus on 6 rods or less and get those rods working rather than trying to run 12 rods. Your ability to catch fish with 6 rods will be just as good as 12 rods if you focus on those rods and get them working how they should work. You can run a 6 rod spread and cover a huge majority of the water column. 2 divers, 2 riggers, and 2 boards, you can cover 140 feet of water and have rods kind of staggered throughout the column and fishing for different kinds of fish. While running 6 rod spread, I like to run a very diverse spread, especially summertime, for multiple different species. And people say, oh, well, how can you catch lake trout going, trying to go slow for a lake trout and while trying to catch steelhead going fast? Well, there are lures that work differently for different speeds. So if I'm straight trout fishing, I'm going to throw a steel dodger down there. I'm going to bang the bottom. I'm going to go 1.8 knots, and chance of me catching steelhead or kings going 1.8 knots probably goes down. But I can put out a big paddle, which is much more speed tolerant than, say, an old school or a Jensen. So when I'm fishing out deep, straight out of North Point, and I want to catch my customers a big variety of fish, I'm going to put this down right away. I'm not going to put the dodger down. I'm going to put something plastic down there so that I control at 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 knots and run spoons, and they're going to look good while I can still be down deep catching trout and kings. Because the big plastic always catches kings as well. As for leads and coppers, that goes back to where am I fishing today? What am I doing? What do I want to run? But there's days I'm sitting out fishing and I've got, on my boat I've got 16 rods in the water, and I look at my spread and I go, man, I got 3 rods working. And that's because I've gone and overthought it. I've got all this stuff out there and I've forgotten to focus just on those few rods. Lauren, you catch a lot of fish. You run, how many rods do you run?
6.
6 rods. So now I'm not saying that I'm going to go out there and run 6 rods. I've got a lot of cooler to fill with a lot of people on my boat. However, when you've got 6 rods and they are all working well, and you're able to focus on those 6 rods, especially if you're newer to this, you will perform a lot better than trying to just go crazy and rolling all sorts of crazy stuff. And that goes with keeping it simple. So what I have on this table right here is I just grabbed from my house, and I said, okay, I could probably put together 75 to 80% of all my charters with what is on this table and tackle. On any given day, I could probably make it happen. I don't have a lot of king flies here, but that's just grab the basic stuff here. And now, I'm not saying that this is what I have on my boat. I have a million spoons, flashers, flies, spinning glows, stuff that I haven't looked at in 10 years and used. But I want it if I need it. But with about 10 moonshines, a handful of other smaller spoons, I did another seminar and somebody asked me, you really didn't cover flashers. Do you like all these different flashers and this and that? And I said, I am very simple. I have probably 5 or 6 flashers that I use on any given day, and then every now and then there's something different in there. And I'll go through those real quick with you guys. The white hotspot, I'm sure you can use a white Dreamweaver or a white Pro Troll, whatever. Simple, basic, it's been working for a long time. Number 1 in the lineup, probably, for a flasher. I have the Dragon Slayer, which is a, it's made by Opti Tackle. It's a Pro Troll King, one of the two. Got that guy, the frog E-chip, it's a great selection, the dragon lady E-chip, and the green hotspot. I'm not real difficult when it gets to it. There's a lot of new colors out there, and it can get overwhelming. And you're going to end up taking all your good stuff off that you've had faith in or has worked for you in the past, and all of a sudden you've got the new blah 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 that looked really cool at the tackle shop down there with this new fancy fly, and you're sitting there and you're like, why am I not catching anything? You've changed lures so many times, you've got a hunk of junk in the water. And you go back and you grab your white hotspot or whatever your tackle that's tried and true, you put it down there and it starts firing off. And you're like, oh, well, I overthought that. So, huge thing for me is not overthinking it. And my first mates catch me sometimes. I'll start changing lures, and I'll watch them walk over, pop it down there I just changed, and they'll walk up to the dash and grab the same lure I had on 2 hours ago, put it back down there, and it starts working. Got to be in the fish to catch them. And the worst thing you can do when you're not catching fish, unless you know you're in the fish, is start cycling through. You guys want to change your speed, your angle, and the water you're in before you start cycling through a lot of baits. Now, if you got a rod that's firing off boom, 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 you know there's fish in the area and your other rods aren't working, then you start focusing on those rods and how to get them to work as well. But overthinking tackle, I think, is one of the main problems people have on catching fish. Is there's a lot of good lures that people will take off when they're just not in the fish yet.
So Caleb?
Yes?
If you saw on your fish finder, if you saw a fish trailing off to where your downrigger was and then he swam away, and you saw that a couple times, what would you start doing different?
So I would start changing my angle first and my speed. I change my speed a lot. On my boat, my speed's really hard to adjust because I have electronic trolling valves and they don't work the best. So I do a lot of turning, just kind of zigzagging. I'll get one side to speed up, one side to slow down a little, and if one side starts working another, then I'll start trying to work on my speed and getting to slow down and speed up. Now, if I do that, I've changed tons of different angles and speeds, and I'm still not happening, then I might start messing with my tackle a little more, my rods, my baits. But I try not to go too crazy on my lures until I've tried those other things first. Just because I don't want to also get on the right angle, and instead of a RV Moonshine Wonder Bread, which I believe is probably the best spoon on the market, and it works for everything, and I take that off and put on some new thing, because I'm like, oh, this looks so good, I think I'm going to lose out on fish that I should be catching. So that's what I would do first.
Okay.
So now there are times when you're fishing shallower water and those fish will just shut down and you've got to wait them out. And that's really hard to do because you'll see those hooks coming up and trail you and you want to change things up. But those fish you sometimes just have to wait out. I don't have the ability to wait them out a lot of times because I'm on a time crunch. So a lot of times I'll just turn east and go ahead and go find active fish if I don't think those fish are active anymore. One thing I do when that happens too is, if it's a Saturday morning and I come out of the harbor and the hill looks like a Christmas tree and there's just lights everywhere, I won't even stop. I'll just go past them. There was a trip last year. This cooler was taken, this picture was taken. This is a 150 quart igloo and it is, one more fish we not have been able to close. I mean, it was jam tight. We had 5 kings over 20 pounds. It was just an awesome day of fishing. And what that day was, my customers were 30 minutes late. Fishing was not good. It was actually really tough. And my customer got on the boat, guy that comes out a couple times a year, and he looked at me and said, Caleb, are we going to catch some kings today? And I responded with, man, I hope we catch a fish today. And we came out of the harbor, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it looks like a disaster out here. Just boats everywhere. And I was frustrated, and I just opened the boat up, and I went until there was no boats in front of me. And I set up. And it was as fast as I could get rods in the water. And everybody inside of me is telling me how terrible it is. Well, there was so much pressure on that shallower 60 to 100 foot of water, and I set up in 120. All the fish were getting pushed out, and I set up right on top of them. So don't always follow the pack. Get outside of it. Those fish will get spooked, in that shallow water, especially with Lake Michigan, how it is now. It's so clear. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm fairly new to this.
Okay.
So it's easy for you to say like your tried and true baits, right? And so if I'm like chasing everybody around looking at their tried and trues, it becomes overwhelming. So is there like a color staple that you would say, hey, you should have a white one, you should have a green one? You know what I'm saying? Like, so if I'm looking at like salmon candy, or everybody's got all these different things online, it becomes completely overwhelming.
Don't get overwhelmed by that. So I'm going to get into some specific baits and just kind of tell you. So one thing I can tell you, this is going to really be hard for you, and everybody. But when I started this and I got into the first meeting, I was told by Dan Keating, I said, I was asking about what's the best bait. He said, there's only one for sure thing in all of coho fishing, and that is a coho. And all salmon fishing is a coho will hit a red dodger and a green peanut fly in the spring. That's the only thing I can tell you that will always be right and will always work. So that's,
but it just as far as like a starting point.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
so this right here is kind of my starting point.
Okay.
What I could do in a season, and I would say a lot of the lures on this table are lures that most people, all salmon fishermen probably have. It's just very basic. There's nothing super crazy here. It's all just kind of like starter off. Like if I go on vacation midsummer and I come back after 3 days and I haven't fished, which is a long time for me, I give props to the guys that can fish on every Saturday, just once a week, and go out and pound the fish. I feel lost when I'm out of the water for 3 or 4 days. It's like I'm relearning, but this is kind of like where I'd be starting.
Okay.
So I didn't try, I won't try and get you to buy all the new fangled baits. Keep it simple. There's 5, my first mate always tells me, there's 5 coho flies, 5 king flies, 20 spoons, and a handful of flashers, and you can survive. A lot of that tackle just sits in the box. But as fishermen, we go to the tackle shop and we're like, oh, that looks good.
Right.
So, how do I know what to run? Time of year, where the water temp break is, depth of water, weather, what are we targeting? So, lures in the morning, different than lures in the afternoon. That's getting a little more difficult. There's also lures that work all day. So I've already discussed it, the RV Moonshine Wonder Red. I think that everybody should have 10 of these in their tackle box. That should just be a staple. That's one spoon that from the spring to the fall, one of the only spoons that is almost always in the water on my boat. I probably go through 10 of these a year. They get chewed up, bitten off. My first mates don't know how to tie a knot and throw it in the lake. But I go through a lot of them.
What depth do you really like that? Is there a general depth on that one, Brett?
I don't think it works everywhere. I've run on 3 colors, 5 colors, 10 colors, 12 colors, 400 coppers, riggers. I think that's just, it's one of the few spoons that I can catch all the species on, and I just put it in the water and I don't know what it's going to catch. It's one of the very few spoons that I have a lot of faith in for everything. And for what I'm doing, that's what I care about. I want to fill my cooler up, and I want a little bit of everything in there. It makes my customers happy. It's an adventure out there to always have something different going on. So, time of year. You're not going to run a peanut fly in August usually. It's just, that's just something to look at when you're kind of picking out your tackle. What are we targeting? Everything I put in the water, I try not to put down for one specific fish. Even when I'm like lake trout fishing, that's one of the things about the paddles versus an old steel dodger. I put that down there with the idea that I'm going to catch possibly cohos, kings, lake trout. I've caught steelhead down 120 feet because I think that's more of a diverse bait than a steel dodger, and it's a lot more speed tolerant than a dodger. So, weather, overcast versus sunny. I like more of the greens, orange when it's sunny. When it's kind of overcast, I like more of the like a blue or like a darker color, like the RV Blue Flounder. I really like in overcast conditions. I think it's one of the best baits for overcast conditions. It just seems to work really well for a lot of different species. And then I just started using this. I got in the craze after the guy caught that big king out of Michigan on the raspberry carbon. I had to jump on the craze and I bought one. And I actually think it's a terrible looking spoon. But I put it out, dark condition, it's a great spoon. So for like a moonshine, the burnt bread, blue flounder, and then the raspberry carbon are probably my 3 favorites for like overcast conditions. And then if it's sunny, I like the Wonder Bread, which I like overcast too, but the green flounder, the Shelly snack, I probably use a dozen to 15 moonshines on an average basis. And there's so many, and I don't use the majority of them. I think there's a handful you can get that will keep you going if you're not trying to, have a garage full of tackle. It's keeping it simple. You don't need to go and have one of everything. Some guys will tell you, oh, I gotta have it. Well, you don't want to overthink it. You start cycling through tackle, it really hurts you, I believe. So, get into spring coho fishing. You need, starting off coho fishing, you need 6 of these. If you're gonna run 6 rods, you need 6 of these. You don't need to get into anything crazy. Stubbies are a great thing made by Gold Star. They've gotten really big the last couple of years. They do work. I use them. They work fantastic. We're keeping it simple. You need 6 double O Lure Jensen Dodgers or double O Gold Star orange or red Dodgers. You don't need to go crazy. If you're keeping it simple, you want to catch is cohos. It's all you need. As for peanut flies and then the half cuts, which are the 2-inchers, I could probably survive. I got 7 coho flies here that I would say are 95% of the time the coho flies I have in the water. There's very, very few times throughout the season that I think there's a boat that's finished up and limited out before me, and it's because of a coho fly. I've got a green Liz half cut, this is a blue Liz half cut, and a blue green gold half cut. Those are the 3 half cuts. I think that on any given day, you don't need any more than that. As for the peanuts, I've got the 2-tone, the original Peter fly, which is just very, very basic. The next generation, which is like a teal and mirage, an aqua, and a blue, black, purple for when you start getting a lot of bugs out there. Once a lot of bugs go out there, you want something with a little darker color in there, and that is a fantastic fly. But otherwise, people come out there and they just overthink these cohos. Like I told you earlier, that's the only for sure thing in all of salmon fishing, is that a coho will hit a red dodger and a green peanut fly in May. But other than that, people talk about the body baits. By the time those cohos get up here from the south, body baits aren't a big thing here. I don't know if anybody here is really big on body baits. I know they work really well in Indiana, but by the time the cohos get up here, Dodger flies have always performed better for me. You walk down the 3 charter docks at North Point, and all you see is 100 of these waving around in your face. And so that's, you said you're pretty new to that. Coho fishing is something that should definitely not be overthought. Keep it simple. If I go out there and, go ahead.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you mix in your 2-inch flies and your peanut flies right out of the blocks, or do you kind of go with the larger ones a little bit?
So
later?
when I start my season, I'm usually early April, and I was out of a 16 rod spread, I probably have 14 peanut flies out in April, and then a couple half cuts. And I'll kind of start watching, and as the season goes on, I'll switch more to 2-inch. I prefer the 2-inchers too because you can replace the hooks on them, and I hate breaking peanut fly hooks. It's like the number one thing that ticks me off in the spring is when you grab a coho and you rip the hook out and you hear it. You hear the snap. So I really, really like 2-inchers over that, but in the spring, the peanut flies usually will work better. So in an effort not to go try to keep it simple, for leader length on my flies, early spring, do any of you guys start fishing in April? If you fish in April, keep your leaders a little longer. That's one thing. I keep my coho leaders a little longer, like 20 inches almost. In the early spring, that water's ice cold, and then I'll start shortening them up shortening them up a little bit. Come kind of May, early June, I'll shorten them to 17 inches or so. But that's not too critical usually for a coho. Rainbows. They're kind of the most nomadic fish. Everybody tells me when to come fish for them. My best rainbow fishing last year was in September, which was kind of odd for me. We had one trip where we had like 21 rainbows or something. It was just an absolute blast. I went out trout fishing, and I had 2 leads out, and all of a sudden they just kept getting hit. I'm like, huh. Also, by the end of the trip, I had 6 leads out, and we were just catching rainbows with no trout. It was absolutely fantastic. For spring rainbow fishing, you can catch all your rainbows on your coho stuff. There's a little better flies to use, like the blue green gold and the blue Liz, which are 2 of my best coho flies, are also my 2 best rainbow flies for the spring. What I do for the rainbows is all I do is I send my dodger and my fly a little farther back, put it a little farther outside of all the coho stuff, and that's my rainbow rod. It seems to, catch cohos, but it won't catch rainbows well. You can run super slim, stingers, moonshines on boards and catch them that way. But again, I'm trying to fill a cooler as fast as I can and make sure I stay on top of these fish, so I want something that's dual purpose. And those flies will catch rainbows and cohos in the spring.
How deep do you run that then?
How deep?
Run the rainbows on the outside.
And this is spring rainbows. I'm just running it on a basic keel weight. So this is a half ounce, this is a 5/8 keel weight. As for keel weights, I've been asked this question by every seminar I've been at. I don't think the size of the keel weight matters. I believe all it does is keep that dodger below the water. Everybody asks if you want 1/4, 3/8, 5/8, half ounce. I don't think it matters. I'm going to stagger my boards. My insides board is going to be, only 15 foot back. My second board is going to be 25 foot back, and I'll stagger them that way. But as for size keel weight, everybody's like, oh, does it help get it deeper, shallower? If you have a 1/4 ounce versus maybe 1.5 ounces, yes, there'll be some difference. But the difference between 3/8 and a half or whatever, I don't think keel weights matter. Just put it out there. All it does is keep the dodger below the water. I don't think it matters. That's just me. Some other guys might disagree with me, but for the rainbows, I'm just going to send this back. What I like to do for my outside board, I like to stretch that outside board like 50, 60 foot behind the planer board, lock it in, and that's my rainbow rod. And it'll also catch cohos too. So that's spring though. As for summer, definitely you're switching more to spoons for steelhead. My number 1 steelhead spoon is the RV Moonshine Wonder Bread, and then this is the Green Prism Hornet, which is also moonshine. It's only available at Fleet Farm. Rob's not in here, so he can't yell at me. The last 2 years, I've placed in Samarama. This was the winning rainbow for Samarama last year. It was caught on an RV Moonshine Wonder Bread on like a 400 copper. And this is my trade secret to placing in Samarama. I've placed the last 3 years, 2 on steelhead, 1 on trout, and they all were caught on an RV Moonshine Wonder Bread. There's the tournament secret, guys. So, and everybody, kind of when I was taught how to steelhead fish, when I first started, was, everybody's talking about oranges and bright colors, and I don't catch a ton of steelhead on big bright colors. A lot of greens, Wonder Breads, the NBK series and Stinger, the regular and the RV, or UV, excuse me, they're really good steelhead spoons. So don't always be caught up that you need orange, need orange, need orange. And these other spoons, again, I'm trying to multi-species fish. So I want a spoon like the Wonder Bread, like the Flounder Pounder, or the Stinger NBK. They're such great spoons for keeping it simple, and they will catch multiple species. And that's what I'm trying to do when I'm fishing. Very often do I put a rod down and think, this is specifically for steelhead, or this rod is specifically for lake trout. I want that rod to catch a lot of fish and a variety of fish. So that's the way I try and run my entire spread on my boat. Kind of just touch on king salmon real quick here. We've kind of gone over most of these spoons here. For the moonshines, you guys can come up after and kind of look at the variety of moonshines I brought here, but I keep it really simple. I run the same probably dozen moonshines from the spring until the fall, and there's not a big variety in how much I change them. Just because usually between that dozen moonshines you can cover majority of fish, majority of the season. You don't need to, there's very few times in the year where I have a rod get changed a dozen times in a trip. I'm going to try angle, speed, direction, all that before I start rapidly changing a lure. Stingers, the NBK the last 2 years has probably been our best stinger. I've gone through a lot of them. I kind of dug around my stinger box last night, and this is the best conditioned UV NBK I could find, because stingers are made like junk and they fall apart. The tape comes off, the paint comes off, but they do work. So that spoon the last 2 years has probably been one of the best. The Kevorkian's tried and true, which is the purple stinger, and the caramel dolphin and the blue dolphin were very, very good last year, which are very old spoons. So that's keeping it simple. Again, you don't need to go buy the brand new blah, blah, blah. The old spoons work great. You don't need to go do nothing crazy. It's better to have a lot of a good spoon that you know works for you. And these spoons might be the best for you, but you know what will work for you. And the guys have been to my seminar before, I talk about that. Be confident with what you have in the water. That's huge. You hear something on the radio, and they're, I'm running the reverse monkey puke beach spoon, whatever. Like, don't listen to that. Just because it's working for them doesn't mean it's going to be working for you. People have asked me about my seminars, well, don't give all your secrets away. My secrets might not be your secrets. And so be confident what you're running. You have a spoon that you know works. Don't listen to so-and-so on the radio. They could be doing a different angle, different speed, different water clarity where they're at. You got to know what's working for you at that time. I can't tell you, when I used to fish club tournaments, you'd be there and the first place guy and the second place guy would be a pound apart. And they'd talk about what they used at the end of the trip, and you're like, what? Total different baits, total different water, but they're focusing on where they're at that time. And they're focusing on making sure that 9 rods in a tournament, they're running all very well. When I tournament fished, that really helped me learn how to keep 9 rods all working rather than trying to run 1,000,000 rods and have 2 working. For flashers and flies for kings, I don't have much more to show you than what I already showed you here in these flashers. I can get by most of my season with 5, 6, 7 different flashers that are my tried and true, and very rarely do I have something else out. For kings, my favorite spin doctor, I don't use a ton of spin doctors. This is the Blue Bubble spin doctor, which this is the Blue Bubble Dreamweaver Action Fly. It's the only Dreamweaver Action Fly I use. And this, especially early morning, evening, or overcast conditions, is a phenomenal king bait, especially down deep.
What was that for?
The Blue Bubble Action Fly. I think the next one actually shows the flies on it. There's the flashers again. Flies, here we go. As for flies, you need 5 flies. There's a few more than that up there, but the bullfrog, I'm a big Howie fan. I'm not saying they're the best, they fall apart, I'll admit that. But the bullfrog, the super frog, the green crinkle, and aqua. Between those 4, you really have a good chance of catching some fish. I would say the bullfrog's number 1. It's a phenomenal king fry. This is actually right here, hooked on this mussel head. You can show off riches. Or it's not necessarily riches, what it is. But the bullfrog is just a little boy blue and frog material. It's very, very simple fly. Works really well. I run it behind, I'll put it behind the blue bubble sometimes, a white paddle, one of the dragon slayers. It's just one of those flies that just is a phenomenal bait for multiple different species. Super frog is just a bullfrog, added mirage into it, really. Green crinkle is just a green fly, and then aqua is a great fly for multiple species. Great steelhead, love aqua flies. If you're catching steelhead on a fly, a lot of times I use aqua for that. But there's a lot of new flies out there in the market. All the salmon candy stuff you see, and this and that. Oh, white. Forgot, I didn't put white up there. A white fly. You need a white fly. Especially the old timers will tell you you need a chrome doctor and a white fly. But between those 5, you've got a pretty good handle on any day of the week to catch a lot of fish on flies. So, but yeah, it's easy to get crazy with the amount of flies in the market now, salmon this. But then you talk to a lot of these big tournament guys, oh, what'd you catch your big king on? A Howie bullfrog, a white hotspot. It's you can get overthinking it sometimes. Lake trout. Anybody that knows me knows I love fishing for lake trout. Let's see how happy I am. It's just something that it's when I got into this industry, it was one of the worst years we ever had for kings. So when I got into the fishing, I was like, what are these little things on the bottom here that I can catch? And so I really kind of dedicate a lot of my time to figure out lake trout. We'll get into the dodgers, paddles, spoons, spinning glows. As for dodgers, I keep it pretty simple, and I know you can't get a lot of lure Jensen's anymore. They don't exist. People pay a fortune for them online because they're not accessible. Gold Star does make a good dodger, but that's keeping it simple. If you want to go straight lake trout fishing, you get a smoke dodger, a chrome dodger, and then my third is a mystery dodger, which is this guy here. Besides those three dodgers, I have a bin of dodgers that probably weighs 40 pounds. And 90% of the time I reach in and grab a dodger, it's one of those three. So if anybody has anything they want to sell, come see me after the seminar. As for paddles, white, chrome, and maybe something else. Otherwise, between a chrome paddle and a white paddle, there's not many times you have to change either of those two. As for brands of those, I don't really think it makes a huge difference. I think there is times that when having the fin versus not having the fin does make a difference with the action, depending how those, if they're moody or not. But they all make a good big paddle. I've kind of experimented sometimes and tried different stuff, but those three colors are fine. I don't know if you guys can see, but we were talking about keeping it simple. In the fall, if you lake trout fish, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is like a 16-pound trout we caught, and we got a full fly and 3 spinning glows with beads stacked on top of each other here. This is not something I run on an everyday basis. This was a day when the trout were biting, and we wanted to see what they would continue to bite. And so my first mate just kept adding another spinning glow. Every time we catch a fish on that rod, he'd add another spinning glow to it to see. And I think we ended up with 4 total, and we still caught fish on it. So does that mean that bait was the number one bait? With my buddy next to me running a whatever bait, totally different than what we were running, they probably would have caught fish too. When the fish are active, they're going to bite a lot of different things. But when they're not, you want to keep it simple and continue running your tried and true stuff. So when those fish turn on, they're going to bite. Spoons, my 3 favorite trout spoons is the Old Yeller made by Silver Streak. It's one of the very few Silver Streaks I run. I think that is a great spoon. It's old school. All it is a chrome blank with a little chartreuse edge on it. The Mag Wonder Bread on a 400 copper. The Trout Killer, it's visible to reel in, but it's a Trout Killer. And the RV Orange Flounder. As for spinning glows, the next one, that slides backwards, but 95% of the time I run a paddle, I have a little boy blue tail with a pink glow spinning glow. This one's got the little fire stripes in it. You can get the pink polka dot on one too. I use them interchangeably. 90% of the time I'm trying to catch lake trout, that is what I have down. That's keeping it real simple. Very rarely do I think the spin and glow makes a huge, huge difference. Watching the bottom. So these 2 pictures right here are about 2 days apart. And it's hard to see. We were in the same area, same water. And this one, you can see all these marks staggered. This is all fishing the South Reef out of Waukegan. These are all trout marks. And this is 2 days later, all trout marks. Huge difference, right? These ones are hiding the bottom, these ones are suspended. How am I fishing for these different fish? When I'm catching suspended trout, I think a paddle will outperform a dodger every day of the week. They can see it coming from multiple directions, makes a big flash. If they're on the bottom, I like running a dodger. I like the way the dodger moves down there. I tap the bottom every now and then. looks gooder. That's watching your graph, knowing what those fish want. If I see it like this, I'm trying to catch these fish, I might drop it down 150 feet here, we were in or so, and just leave it. Or if I still don't get it, maybe I'll start raising up and seeing what this is. I see this, 90 to 100 feet, those might not be trout. This is October, but October we catch a lot of 3-year-old kings. I may pull that up, or I might start putting some spoons down there to see what's down there. So if I see them like this, I'm going to drop the ball to the bottom, I'm going to hit it once, and let the blowback come up. For you guys that haven't bottom fished a lot, dropping a downriver ball, I don't care if it's a 20 or a 25 or whatever you put down there, and you hit the bottom once, you are not fishing the bottom. That is not bottom fishing. That ball at 25 pound weight might only get 5 feet, 10 feet of blowback, but it is no longer on the bottom. You're on a 12, you might get 25, 30 feet of blowback. You're nowhere near the bottom anymore. You got to continue to connect with the bottom if you want to fish the bottom. So a lot of guys struggle with when they fish the bottom, they hit it once and they think they're fishing on the bottom. That ball might be 20 feet off the bottom now. Every few minutes you got to reconnect and make sure you're still there. Like I said before, that setup is 90% of the time is what is behind one of my paddles. Running dodgers and stuff, I'll run that behind that too, but otherwise a white tail and a green spin like the old days, old Mo, is really good too. Exhibit A, why I run paddles versus dodgers a lot of the time. My biggest king last year came on a white paddle with a fly. I think it was like 26 pounds. Last year's our biggest. Came on a paddle. Guys really wanted to catch a king. We caught 2 3-year-olds in the morning, right off the bat on wires. Then we slid off catching trout. And on the way back in, we doubled up on 4-year-olds, both of my 2 deepest rods on the bottom, midday. Kind of went over this already. I'm going to touch just some tips for what I use for terminal tackle and stuff. For guys that are new, some huge things to look at. Good quality swivels. I've gone on with some recreational guys and they've got just a barrel swivel on there. It'll twist your line. You'll actually lose lures because of it. Spend the money on a good quality swivel. I really like torpedo swivels. They have 2 different really nice swivels. They have the double ball bearing one and then a single ball bearing. I just use a single ball bearing, but definitely good quality swivels, good quality split rings, and good quality hooks. That is huge. A lot of people think, oh, if it bites, it's going to hook itself. The last couple of years, I really started spending a lot of money on my hooks. I got sick of breaking hooks, got sick of bending hooks, and I kind of started cycling through hooks. And
That's what happens when you buy all the cheap hooks.
Oh, okay.
You know, if you really go buy quality stuff from Rob here, it would be really nice.
Thanks, Tony. So I kind of shuffled through. I tried Gamakatsu's, VMC. I went through it all, and I am sticking with Owner. I'm not a spokesperson for Owner. I'm not sponsored by Owner, but I am a big firm believer in their hooks. They are razor sharp. They're super strong. I've never seen one bend out. The only time I've broken one is when I'm in a rush and I grab the pliers and I've got 2 other fish on and I grab the hook and I just snap it and I'll pop a prong off. But that's rare. And I think they have a much better gap, the way the hook is angled. Definitely increased my kill ratio with Owners. And this year I started to switch to their smaller hooks for cohos because we were having a stretch where those cohos, your rigger, your diver would go, just get slammed 3 times real fast, and by the time me and my first mate could get to the rod, they'd be gone. So I switched to Owners, and an idea that I could probably get a better hookup ratio, and it did help.
Those are round bends, right?
Yeah, I got a little bend in them.
Right, the round, right.
Couple other tricks I like to use for just kind of tackle. For line, spring coho fishing, I like the big game high vis, which for anybody that knows when they're fishing and it's like a little overcast or there's a glare on the water and you can't see your board anymore, high vis line is a really nice trick for running just high line coho fishing. Your line lights up and you can see it go out and you'll be able to see where your boards are then. You just follow it right out. Split rings. We have a lot of big kings in the lake right now. We may not have the numbers we had 10 years ago, but the ones we're catching are big. And you don't want that happening. So you watch your split rings, something simple to go buy a package of. Have good ones on boat to replace. Downrigger releases. I don't think there's a release in the market that can beat a Scotty right now. They don't damage your line, they have 2 settings, they last a long time. They're just a really, 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 really good product. Kind of going back to tackle. I have a lot of tackle. We walk by my boat in the middle of summer, I've got 60 spoons hanging up on a rack. And everybody's like, oh, you use all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, no, there's probably 15 spoons that we run on a daily basis. Because that's what works for us. Trust what has worked before. You'll see your spoons that work in certain conditions, and they will probably continue to work in your future fishing experiences. Seasonal differences. There's certain spoons that just seem to work better earlier in season and end of season. One of those for me is the Moonshine RV Shelly Snack. It's a great spoon. Can't catch a fish on it after July. Don't know why. I just can't. It's one of those spoons where I think to myself, this is June, I should run this. And that's going to be your guys' own experience of running your tackle, and kind of have a journal, have a book, write it down if you don't think you remember it. But remember when that spoon is working. There are certain lures that will work only certain times of year. That's what I talked about. You're not going to put a peanut fly out in September. It's just not, that's not going to work. Don't end up with junk in the water. We discussed that as well. If you're marking fish, or you got one rod catching fish and you got another rod not catching fish, don't cycle through till you end up with junk. Put a good lure down there that you know is going to work, and stick with it. Change your angle, change your speed before you start cycling through all of your lures. And then the conditions as well. Weather, clarity. Yes, Tony?
Magnum spoons?
Magnum spoons.
You versus smaller spoons in the springtime?
I like smaller spoons. 90% of the time I like smaller spoons. I have a lot of Magnum
Do
spoons.
you have faith in the spoons you're running?
Oh yeah.
Alright, there you go.
In the spring though, I run mostly flies
Right.
for the co-hosts. We can take questions now. Really good luck to see you guys, but I'd be happy to answer a ton of questions.